Dear friends, today we will discuss such an interesting biblical fact as the liberation of the Jewish people from Egyptian captivity. It would seem to be such a joyful event, but was everything really smooth? And why did people start complaining and scolding Moses as soon as they left the Egyptian lands? Let's figure it out. Let's start by looking at the conditions that the Jewish people found themselves in on Egyptian soil. At first, everything was just fine. Joseph, one of the favorites of the ruling pharaoh, ensured that the Jews did not know troubles in Egypt. However, after his death, when another pharaoh came to power, God's people found themselves in disfavor. People had to work until exhaustion, were constantly taxed, suffered humiliation and beatings. And so, when Moses led them out of Egypt to lead them to the Promised Land, the unexpected happened. The Jews immediately showed their negative side of character, starting to be indignant that their conditions at that moment were far from ideal. First, grumbling arose among the foreigners who went out with the Jews. And then God's people did not remain silent, demanding, for example, not just food, but a delicious banquet. Here is how the Bible describes this story in the book of Numbers. And the strangers among them began to show lust. And the children of Israel with them sat and wept and said, "Who will give us meat to eat? We remember the fish that we ate in Egypt for nothing, cucumbers and melons and onions and garlic." By the way, at that time the Israelites ate manna from heaven every day, which I already talked about in one of my recent videos. So it is true, the Jews were ready to return to captivity and remain in slavery, just to preserve those bits of the familiar comfort to which they were accustomed. When Moses prayed to God, telling about the claims of the Jewish people, the Lord said that since people do not value freedom so much and rebel for the sake of their whims, then they will have meat. At that time, there were about 600,000 footmen in the Jewish camp, and they all had to be satisfied. Let's find out what divine gifts looked like in the original from the Bible. The Lord will give you meat, and you will eat. You will not eat it for 1 day, nor for 2 days, nor for 5 days, nor for 10 days, nor for 20 days, but a whole month, until it comes out of your nostrils and becomes disgusting to you, because you despised the Lord who is among you, and wept before him, saying, "Why was it necessary for us to go out of Egypt?" Then truly terrible events took place. A strong wind miraculously arose and brought quails from the sea to the Jewish tents. There were a lot of them. However, the people showed excessive greed. He who gathered little gathered 10 homers, that is 2,200 liters. The Bible says, the meat was still in their teeth. They had not yet chewed it, when God began to strike the people with a great plague. When the people finally had their fill, they were struck with a severe plague and many of them died. This was the price for whim, impatience, and mistrust of God. And the place where the people who died from the plague were buried was called Kibrot Hatava, which is translated as Burial of Desires, a place between Mount Sinai and Hazeroth, where the Israelites were then camped. Most likely, this is the modern hill Rues Elebeirig, located about 50 kilometers northeast of Mount Sinai. The hill is located in a spacious valley that formed at the confluence of several periodically drying up streams. That is, this biblical story is as real as all the other stories described in the Bible.